thousands of years, nomadic tribes roamed freely across Britain. But by 4000 BC, they were starting to settle down. One group made their home here, a rather distinctive part of the southwest.
This may seem a pretty ordinary hill, but it's not. It's an exceptional, quite extraordinary part of the great British landscape. It's called the South Dorset Ridgeway, and some archaeologists think that this feature is as important as Stonehenge or Avebury in understanding the lives of our prehistoric ancestors. But why do they believe that?
To find out, we'll travel along the Ridgeway, revealing mysterious mounds where the ancient Britons buried their dead, baffling great henges that showcased unexplained rituals, a town built on top of a massive Iron Age hill fort, and a deadly and terrifying Roman war machine.
Wow!
And we'll reveal how the latest scientific advances are shedding new light on our Stone Age ancestors.
This is about the death of prehistory.
New archaeology is unlocking the Ridgeway's secrets and bringing back to life the forgotten prehistoric landscapes of ancient Britain.
The South Dorset Ridgeway is today one of the most popular walks in Britain. But few ramblers realise they're walking on a spot where for thousands of years people made their homes. Now, some £3 million have been earmarked by the Heritage Lottery Fund to preserve and highlight the area's rich history. The extraordinary range of monuments on the Ridgeway make it one of the richest archaeological sites in Britain, and our journey along its length will also be a journey through thousands of years of human occupation.
What was so fascinating about this place to the people of southern Britain? Why were they drawn here? And why were they compelled to build so many monuments?
To find out, I'm going to need some backup. And who better to form a reconnaissance posse than Time Team archaeologists Phil Harding and Alex Langlands.
What do you reckon on all these burial mounds? It's a heck of a lot, isn't it?
Yeah, enormous amount. It was huge concentrations we've got all through this stretch here. So there's obviously some kind of ritual significance to this landscape as well.
A ritual landscape that we're going to get you to walk along.
Yes, whilst you boys are cutting round in your 4x4s, I'm going to be doing the Ridgeway all on foot.
Oh, when you say all, just how far is all?
Well, it's about 20 miles from start to finish.
Oh, well, that's a sort of an afternoon stroll for me. I mean, is that what you're going to do? Are you going to rush across it, or are you going to take your time and really sort of seep yourself into it?
That's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to try and sort of immerse myself in this prehistoric landscape and try and get a sense of what it meant to the prehistoric people who worked and worshipped on this Ridgeway.
Well, while you're trying to engage with ancient people by using your feet, Phil, we're going to ask you to do the same thing using your hands. Because, Phil, what we want you to do is to have a look at the Neolithic and Bronze Age tools and see what you can assess about the people who lived here through their toolkits.
So that'll be making them and using them and really getting my hands dirty like that?
Your sort of thing, yeah.
Absolutely.
So we're going to take Alex from there to there, drop you off and meet you all the way back here, and we'll see you back here in a couple of days.
I look forward to seeing you back here for a beer.
My own task will be to explore the most important sites in the area and learn about the latest archaeological dating methods to better understand the Ridgeway's past. A couple of days from now, the three of us will reunite and put together all we've learned.
Cheers, Tony. Heading east, and there's our Ridgeway, up there. So up through the village, and off I go.
Alex needs to make a good start because he wants to cover the 8 miles to the halfway point by sundown. And while he pounds the footpaths, I'm after the origins of the Ridgeway story, deep in Britain's prehistory, millions of years before people ever arrived on these shores. In the Jurassic, when this geological feature was formed. Geologist Sam Scriven can explain exactly why this spot would have appealed to our Stone Age ancestors.
This Ridgeway must be the best part of 1,000 feet above sea level. What's it made of?
Well, most of the Ridgeway is actually made of chalk, and that's a rock that's sort of 95 to 65 million years old and formed up of tiny, tiny sea creatures. Most of this country, in vast areas of Europe, was actually at the bottom of a warm tropical sea, like a tropical paradise.
Well, it's not at the bottom of the sea now, is it? When did it shoot up into the air?
Well, as you imagine, that's a very long and complicated process, but the last part of that story happened actually about 40 million years ago, when the continent of Africa smashed into Europe and formed the Alps. And those massive geological forces were actually felt this far north, and our rocks were folded up quite gently to create the ridge.
Well, what was it about this landscape that encouraged people to want to develop and cultivate it?
Well, the chalk is a very attractive kind of rock. First of all, it stores a lot of fresh water, and that fresh water comes out into spring lines along the bottom of the ridge in quite a regular way, so it's always there. It's a reliable source. It also, of course, contains nodules of flint. That's a very, very useful material for creating tools.
When the first recorded inhabitants arrived here, around 6,000 years ago, they'd have found the essentials of Stone Age life close to hand: water and a source of quality flint. So that's when our story of the human habitation of the Ridgeway begins, 4000 BC, in the Neolithic era. To the ancient Britons, flint was essential for making tools and weapons. But flints have to be worked, or knacked as it's called, before they're of any use. Phil Harding's joining a group of archaeological volunteers to survey a Ridgeway site for traces of Neolithic flint fragments.
Actually, I love field walking. And I think what I love about it is that element of chance. And you just have a look round and you basically see what you can find. Now, there we go. That's the byproduct of somebody 3,000–4,000 years ago knocking off that piece of flint, and it's been here all that time, and I'm the first person to pick it up.
To examine the finds, he's joined by local archaeologist Hazel Riley. She spent most of her career surveying parts of the Ridgeway.
That is a beautiful blade. You compare it with a big chunky piece like that.
Yeah.
It's a totally different shape, it's a different colour of the flint, it's a different technology. And it could well be that what we're looking at here is two different periods. You think about that. There we've got 19 or 20 pieces of flint. You think that's just what you get on the surface. You think if you had looked through the plough soil, how many pieces you'd get in that 10 by 10 area. And then if you took that, think how many pieces there are. This whole area is just one enormous flint quarry.
And that tells us so much about how important the Ridgeway was in prehistoric times.
It's believed that hundreds of Neolithic people lived alongside the Ridgeway, but little evidence of that survives. Ironically, the best clues about Neolithic life may turn out to be found in the places where they buried their dead. And Alex, just 3 miles into his walk, is approaching one of the oldest Neolithic tombs in the area. It's called the Grey Mare and her Colts. He's meeting prehistoric archaeologist Dr. Richard Bradley.
It's probably the oldest monument on the Ridgeway, say 6,000 to 5,500 years old.
Really?
Yes, something like that.
By walking the Ridgeway, Alex can get up close to hundreds of burial sites to glean information about the Stone Age people who built them.
So our burial chamber then is facing east towards the rising sun, but what else can we say about its location?
Well, the whole mound is elongated and is facing down towards that dry valley, down towards Bridport, and even we have a glimpse of the sea.
Of course.
Yeah, and it's probably down there that the people who were buried here originally had lived, rather than up on the windswept hills. Like a lot of tombs, it's built, it's used, and it's closed off, so that the burial chamber would be behind this stone.
Right, this one here.
This big one here.
Okay.
And you would have an open area in front of it with an entrance there, so that people could gather outside the tomb where we are now.
Okay.
The dead would be in a chamber here, and when the use of the monument was over after a generation or two, this enormous stone has been put in.
So this is effectively blocking then the chamber and stopping those inside, I guess, coming out, and those outside coming in.
Yeah, that's right.
But what do we know about the chamber? I mean,
Well,
in
the
terms
chamber
of the
does
actual
survive.
size.
You've got two sides to the chamber here, and here. This is probably not complete. And this very large stone would have been the roof. It would have been resting on this or higher, and it would have gone across here, and presumably the rest of the chamber is concealed by it. But obviously you can't get underneath now to see.
So it kind of marks the beginning of mankind's relationship with this landscape.
Yes.
It's a statement written in stone that's saying, we belong here.
These monuments tell us that people had settled here and were farming the rich agricultural soils near the Ridgeway. But just because we can explore our Neolithic ancestors' tombs doesn't mean we understand the landscape as they did. Could that ever be possible? A bizarre new archaeological technique suggests we may now be able to see the Ridgeway through Stone Age eyes. Alex Langlands is now 4 miles into his walk across the South Dorset Ridgeway, and he's meeting up with Professor Sue Hamilton.
You too.
Going for a walk.
She's an advocate of a new and controversial method of looking into the past that Alex hopes will give him a Stone Age view of the landscape.
So, despite all of the various advances in archaeological techniques and excavations, it's surprising that we still don't know that much about this landscape and the monuments. So, are there any other techniques that we can use to engage with the place?
What I would call it is subject-centred.
Subject-centred.
But there is a bigger word for it, which is phenomenology.
Phenomenology.
Human beings understand the world, and certainly in prehistory would have understood it much more through their presence in the landscape, walking the landscape and being in it. What I'm saying is think about how you understand your location here through sight. What's to the left of you, what's to the right of you. Your body's got a certain symmetry, so you think about as you move what happens. So there's all sorts of ways in which you can understand, in this case, these natural stones.
Phenomenology may be something of an academic mouthful, but it's really just about using your senses to view and interpret a natural and cultural landscape as people in the past would have done. But can Alex learn to think like an ancient Briton?
I am thinking, actually, I can't just walk a straight line through there.
No.
They are, to a certain extent, they're dictating the path I take through the valley.
Whether you're a Bronze Age person or a contemporary person, does that make any difference?
No, of course it doesn't.
Because you're physically, basically, the same body.
Right.
So if it's a route to understanding how people understood locations and place.
I'm seeing good building material.
There's something more there, isn't there? We don't just want to know that a stone's a bit of building stone.
Right.
We want to know how people understood it. Does it give something status? Is it brought there because it comes from a meaningful place? And surely that's what we want to do as archaeologists. We don't just want to describe what people used and what people ate. Of course that's part of it. But culture's about meaning, the meaning of things. And I think this is one way of understanding meaning. It's not the only way, but I think it's a good route into a landscape.
So it's actually about going beyond the day-to-day and the pragmatic and trying to get to grips with what makes us human then.
Yes, it is.
Great. I'm quite looking forward to this now.
So now Alex has a new archaeological tool to use on his walk. I'm still exploring the Neolithic era too. I've ventured a couple of miles off the Ridgeway to Dorchester to meet Mike Pitts.
What we're going to do here, we're going to go right back into the past. We're going to go down a lift.
He's taking me on an archaeological tour of the town's underground car park.
We're going back to nearly 5,000 years ago.
So what are you going to show me?
OK, so here we have a supermarket car park.
I've noticed that.
1985. And you must be wondering why we're down here.
Absolutely.
See these red discs? What do you think that is?
Well, I assume that it's a manhole cover.
It's a huge manhole cover. It's actually marking a Neolithic pit. And that isn't just the pit, that is actually the size of the post that stood in the pit.
And there are two more?
And there's two more here.
Yeah, wow.
And what's more, look along there, they carry on. There's a line of these post pits, these massive oak posts, put up nearly 5,000 years ago, 2,700 BC.
Did it carry on under there where that blue car is now?
Through the wall that direction and through the wall the other direction. But it's a massive, massive ring of oak posts rising 5, 6, even 10 metres into the air.
Have we any idea what its function would have been?
We have absolutely none.
What I find so intriguing about it is that you must have hundreds of people driving over this every day, and not one of them, I imagine, has any idea what this is.
Surrounded by those massive timber posts, the Great Henge was nearly 4 football pitches wide and would have covered a large part of modern Dorchester. Henges were usually ring-banked earthworks with a ditch on the inside. During the late Neolithic period, hundreds were erected across Britain, and the Ridgeway seems to have attracted more than its fair share. Mike's taking me just down the road to see another equally impressive one called the Mornbury Rings.
Look at this. I mean, you couldn't get further removed from the car park basement.
Gee!
And this is what, 4,000 years ago, is something of what it would have felt to have walked into the centre of a henge. It's defined by a bank, and in this case it's very deep, and we're on chalk, so we would almost have this sense that we were standing inside a kind of circular beachy head.
I'm almost sure that I know what your answer is going to be, but do we know what its function was?
I thought that was going to be your question. In a word, no. But we can say what it wasn't. People did not live here. It wasn't a domestic space. People did not fight here. It wasn't a military defended location. And of course that leads us to the obvious conventional archaeological idea, was that this was a ritual space, and almost certainly that's what it was. It was a place where people came for ceremonies and rituals.
An archaeological excavation in the early 20th century produced some rather curious finds.
This is the power behind the monument. This is a red deer antler that's been pruned of a few surplus tines, so you've got a handle from the shaft of the antler, and this would have been stuck into the chalk and used partly as a hammer, as a pick, and partly as a lever stuck into little holes and wedging the chalk out.
Do you think that was used to excavate the site?
This was definitely used to excavate the site. It was found here, and there were many others. We find these sometimes in hundreds, in huge quantities, and it's almost as if when they'd finished digging with them that they wanted to get rid of them, they'd drop them in the ground. We find them in vast quantities. Now, interestingly, we know this was a henge, and so it had a ditch on the inside of the bank. Now, in this case, instead of just being a simple ditch, we had a succession of interlocking pits, and we reckon there were 50 or so of these pits. And they go down 10 metres.
And that's where these finds came from?
And that's where these finds came from. And there are other finds from these shafts that tell us perhaps something about what was going on here. There are a lot of skulls, in particular skulls of red deer, and also there are bits of human skull. There's something going on here involving the use of red deer skulls and human skulls.
I have a feeling you're saving the best find till last.
Okay, there we go. There used to be a card underneath this that described it as a crudely carved object.
It's a willy, isn't it?
It's a huge willy. Now, why are these here? Again, we find these all over Britain. They're quite common on these henge sites. And they have obvious connotations of sexuality and masculinity and gender, but beyond that, we've no idea what it means. I mean, there could be jokes, there could be something profoundly serious and at the heart of the ceremonies that take place here, and we can only guess. But it is an utterly extraordinary object.
Back on the Ridgeway, it's time to test Alex's grasp of his new phenomenological technique. He's now approaching one of the most important stretches, an area packed with prehistoric burial mounds. And to record his insights, we're kitting him out with a miniature camera.
One of the key things about phenomenology of landscape is to make a record. So you've got something to go back to, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to record my walk and some of my thoughts and musings. Okay, so here is our first barrow. Let's just have a look around it, see what it says to us. No, it's actually quite tall. It really stands out, this barrow. And it's right along this routeway. Look at at that rootway there. There's got to be something in that. There's got to be something in the location of this barrow alongside this thoroughfare, this ancient way. There's got to be some kind of statement being made. This is just an unbelievable bit of landscape here. It's the kind of place where you'd want to bury your ancestors. You know, I'm starting to feel that if I grew up here and I worked these soils, traded via that beach, that I too would want to sort of be a part of this landscape.
Alex is taking this new approach very seriously, and who can blame him? When it comes to understanding the lives of prehistoric people, archaeologists have, until now, been groping in the dark. But one group of scientists have developed an exciting new dating technique, and it's enabling us to reinterpret Neolithic monuments. Using the millions of artefacts already stored in museum warehouses, they're focusing in on the blurry parts of ancient history.
This is a treasure house of information just waiting to get out. What we've done with our project is a new approach to radiocarbon dating.
Show me.
Okay, so if you come and look at my computer. Yep. So this is like a normal old-fashioned radiocarbon date.
So this is the date of one particular find?
Yeah, one cow bone that, you know, from a cow that died one Thursday afternoon, and all we can say is that it happened sometime in this 300-year span.
Yeah.
Okay.
The problem with radiocarbon dating has always been its lack of precision. Until recently, prehistoric researchers often faced a range of probable dates spanning hundreds of years.
So what we do with this new approach to radiocarbon dating is we don't just take one radiocarbon date, we take a whole group of radiocarbon dates from a site, and those radiocarbon dates come in relationships. You know, sample A is earlier than sample B, they come in the sequence through a ditch or something, and we can incorporate that extra archaeological information with the calibrated radiocarbon dates. And suddenly we go from this 300-year span to that.
Oh, that's very impressive, isn't it? Suddenly it's, what, 20, 30 years?
Yeah.
Alex Bayliss and her team pull together a range of radiocarbon dates from a particular site, then combine them with information about the items recovered when the site was excavated.
Now we've got it narrowed down to this, you know, specific generation, this specific person who did something. We can start to write a history of what different people did when throughout the early Neolithic in southern Britain.
This is really exciting, isn't it? All these boxes of Neolithic material that have been hanging around for decades suddenly become part of a real story. They're actually specific to families and individual lives.
Yeah, this is about the death of prehistory. You know, we're now at a stage where we're starting to write a historical narrative for the 4th millennium BC.
Just north of the Ridgeway at Maiden Castle is a Neolithic enclosure which Sir Mortimer Wheeler excavated in the 1930s. Based on the artefacts he found, it had been assumed this enclosure was active for hundreds of years. But now we know otherwise.
So I can tell you that the enclosure at Maiden Castle was built within 10 years of 3550 BC.
Yes.
Okay, and it was in use until within 10 years of 3540 BC. You can see that this enclosure is in use for 10 years, certainly not as long as 20 years.
That's extraordinary. We didn't know that before, did we?
Yeah, no, everybody thought that these things were in use for several hundred years. But no, it's a particular person, a particular lifetime. You know, this could be the grand project of some megalomaniac chieftain.
Why do you think it fell out of use?
Well, there is some evidence that it was attacked. On the west side, the bottom of the ditch is all burnt, and we have other examples where this is sort of a palisade. And then you get big concentration of leaf-shaped arrowheads, early Neolithic arrowheads, and there's evidence that they were actually attached to arrows, and they're broken just in the way they would be if it hit your chest and killed you. So we think that probably there was an attack in the 3540s BC.
From the vast quantities of flint tools, the henges, and a dense scatter of tombs, it's clear the Ridgeway was a busy and somewhat revered place in the Neolithic, and it appears appears this society was sufficiently organised to come together to build vast structures very rapidly. They must also have been prepared to defend them against marauders. So thanks to archaeological work and some new science, our picture of the Neolithic Ridgeway is now clearer than ever before. Just before sunset, Alex reaches the midway point of his walk. A local landowner's let him camp and set a fire. He's hoping to experience the night like a Stone Age man, though his evening meal may not be fully authentic.
I'm having the imaginative beans on toast. I can tell you there's nowhere I'd rather be than up here on a night like tonight. A fantastic view of Weymouth. And it's so still, it's so quiet, it's just awesome, awesome. And I can still see the lumps of the barrows. Just amazing. Time to serve up. Okay, not the most gourmet meal. I'm sure Tony's down in the pub tucking into a nice 3-course dinner. But to be honest, he's the one that's missing out, it's not me. At least that's what I'm telling myself anyway.
If you'd like to see more episodes like this, you can make it happen.
Our new target is to reach 15,000 worldwide supporters on Patreon by the end of 2025. This will enable us to continue expanding the Time Team world. Enjoy front row seats for the greatest show on Earth and under it.
Around 2500 BC, a new era dawned in Britain, the Bronze Age. The first metal artefacts began arriving here from Europe, and this new technology started to change our way of life. It's 7 a.m. Alex Langlands is already attempting to get closer to his Bronze Age ancestors, with the help of a bowl of porridge.
It's the kind of food that I'm sure they would have been eating back in Bronze Age Britain.
Fortunately for me, the breakfast options are rather more agreeable in the King's Arms.
Another sausage, please.
It would be absolutely no good for me if I wanted to try and understand the landscape and the Bronze Age landscape and their way of life. For me to have spent the night in a 4-star hotel just wouldn't work. They must have had their own sort of morning rituals in very much the same way we do. There must have been a process. They must have got up and moved from the kind of bed chamber. Someone would have been charged with getting the fire going, I'm sure. Someone would have been preparing the food, and then there would have been a breakfast, I assume. You know, perhaps just like us, it wasn't all spiritual. Some of it may have actually been quite pragmatic.
So while Alex gears up for another day of becoming one with the landscape, Phil's attempting to understand what advantages bronze may have had for the people of the Ridgeway. He's long been a staunch believer in the advantages of stone tools, so he's challenging bronzesmith Neil Burridge to prove that bronze is better.
Is that what this is? Is this a bronze axe?
This is a bronze axe.
Look, I'm a flint worker, a stone worker. I have been making these things for thousands of years. Why should I change the habits of a lifetime? Why should I throw away my stone axes just so that we can have metal axes?
Much harder material, is much stronger, more reliable.
Ugh, much better axes. You better prove your worth by making me one.
Okay.
Neil specialises in making Bronze Age tools as close as possible to those from 4,000 years ago.
So in that furnace, we've got a crucible.
That's it.
And what's in the crucible?
Copper, and we've just added the tin. Right. See, the other thing we need to do is to warm up our stone moulds.
Right.
So they don't crack or shatter when we cast.
So what's actually happening in that crucible?
Well, it's probably melted by now. The tin's dissolved the copper and it's probably liquefied.
Well, right. Let my under-apprentice have a go. And is it really important that those two halves of the mould are really tightly clamped together?
Yeah, definitely. Otherwise it'll leak. That's it, a bit lower.
Okay.
Right, go a bit closer.
Pour straight away?
Yep, yep. Nice and steady. Keep going. Keep going. Perfect. Just go like that.
It was so simple. Just that act of just literally, it was just pouring it in. My God, look at that. It's an axe. It really is an axe.
Pick it round the body there, because it'll drop out the tongs. That's it.
And what am I going to do?
Just lower it into the water slowly.
It's that act of, I don't know, that act of creativity, really, isn't it?
Mm.
And it can come out now, is it?
If it stays wet, it's safe to touch. No, it's fine. See, if you tap it on the floor, you can hear how hard it is.
Oh, like that?
Yeah.
It really is, isn't it, eh?
Yeah. After cleaning up and hardening, it's incredibly hard material.
That's going to bring me on to my next point. Is it a practical, functional woodworking tool, or really is it a thing of power and prestige?
I would say a power and prestige, definitely. I mean, if it was finished, it would look something like this. And you wouldn't finish a carpentry tool to this level, would you? This is a powerful symbol.
That is an incredibly beautiful object. I mean, it really is a look at me statement, isn't it?
Definitely.
So its beautiful appearance meant that any object made of bronze would have been highly prized. But strangely, Bronze Age people are also well known for their use of stone, particularly their creation of new versions of the henge. I'm meeting archaeologist Neil Sharples at a stone circle overlooked by the Ridgeway.
I suppose for me the most obvious thing about this circle is that they're the only stones I can see in the landscape.
Yeah, well, they've been brought here, probably from the Valley of the Stones, which is a reasonable distance away, a couple of kilometres, and they're quite big stones, you know, so it'd be quite a bit of work to create.
Would they have been standing upright, presumably?
Oh yeah, yes, of course. They've all fallen over. They'd all be upright stones, you know, quite dramatic it would have looked like in the past. Quite impressive.
They'd have been particularly dramatic because they're actually up quite high, aren't they?
Yeah, well, I think that's the important thing about this position. Because of the way the ridge works with a relatively flat top, all you can do is look out to the more distant, and it's also looking at all the ancestors arranged on the ridges on either side. You know, there's a whole series of barrows running down these ridges, and that's where the ancestors of this group would have been, and they would have been calling upon those ancestors and asking them for advice when they were here.
It's really frustrating though, isn't it? We can relate it to the sky, we can relate it to the Ridgeway, we can relate it to other stone circles. What was it for?
Well, it's one of these kind of real difficult problems. It's a focus. You get the sense of, you know, all around you, you're there, and everybody's around you, your ancestors around you, the people are around you, and you're at the centre. It gives you a special feeling of being important, you know,
and a feeling of continuity. If you were making decisions here with reference to your ancestors all the way around you, it must feel as though you were part of this great arc of life.
Yeah, you know, that's the one thing where we can say, well, we know how they felt because we're human beings. We can stand here, it's still the same landscape, and we can get that sense of feeling something that they felt in the past. And you can feel that kind of tentative relationship with your ancestors. Even now, you can feel that.
So Alex isn't the only one seeing the landscape through Bronze Age eyes. This phenomenology seems to be catching.
You did check. We got permission to take one down, have we?
Yeah, well, one.
Back at the Ancient Technology Centre, Phil Harding and Neil Burridge have realised that neither of them have ever actually put a bronze axe to the test. It's time for some Time Team experimental archaeology.
So this is what you can do with a stone axe.
Okay.
And now for the bronze axe.
Now, hold on a minute. Look here. That's the ones with a stone axe. It's quite torn, the chips, isn't it?
Yeah.
These are very, very much cleaner cuts, the ones you're getting with your bronze axe. Oh, getting into the middle, look.
I don't believe this. Is Phil overturning his lifelong prejudice against metal tools?
It works really well.
It really, really does. This works a lot harder and a lot better than I do.
Very clean cuts, aren't they?
Incredibly clean cut.
It's performed quite better than I expected, to be honest.
You said yourself that you thought these were more prestige items rather than use items, but look, there is not a trace of use on there.
It's very functional. I'm not sure the jury's out now.
By the tone of what you're saying, you're having to maybe modify your thoughts about what these things really meant in the Bronze Age. I'm certainly having to modify my thoughts. Much as it pains me to say so, this is a really good tool.
Good tool.
So bronze wasn't only highly prized for its beauty, it must also have had a range of practical uses. Perhaps not surprisingly then, the Bronze Age saw a trade boom with Europe, and the people of the Ridgeway were perfectly placed to prosper. By the time bronze gave way to iron as metal of choice around 800 BC, there were thousands of people living here. And the introduction of iron weapons would change the Ridgeway forever. In the Dorset Museum, there's a collection of artefacts found in an Iron Age grave on the Ridgeway. Excavation revealed a skeleton, alongside which lay an impressive collection of iron weaponry, including a spear and a long sword. This revolutionary metal made weapons more readily available, forcing the development of new defensive structures on the Ridgeway, Iron Age hill forts. To find out why these places were so important, Alex is meeting archaeologist Miles Russell at the Chalbury hill fort overlooking Weymouth.
Whoa! You've got the bay in here, haven't you?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, this is really focusing down on probably what was a major harbour area down there in the bay.
Right. So they would have had a large harbour here, trading with who?
Well, there's a series of tribes on the other side of the English Channel. But if you think of the tribe here, it's one half of that community. So the English Channel isn't a barrier, it's a highway that's connecting them.
But then why do you need such a defensive site?
I think if you think of this site as being the beating heart of a particular community, so this is where all the key resources are being brought to, so they need to be secured. This is one of the first hill forts in this landscape, so from about 600 BC onwards, this is part of a major trade network from this point.
And is it the case then that these barrows, are they still finding themselves part of the people's lives here?
Certainly a lot of the Bronze Age barrows that we see around here are being reused in the Iron Age. They're placing things in those barrows a good 2,000 years after they were originally built.
Right, so there is a continued significance for barrows like that here.
Hill forts grew to house wealthy, significant communities across the Ridgeway. Around 600 BC, one group began expanding the old Neolithic enclosure at Maiden Castle. When they'd finished, they'd built the largest hill fort in Britain.
It does look colossal, doesn't it? It's quite incredible, isn't it, to think that was constructed over 2,000 years ago. Phenomenal amount of work, and it's so impressive in the landscape. Amazing.
People must have thought Maiden Castle would survive any attack. But just a decade after the death of Christ, it faced the ultimate challenge, the might of the Roman army. The hill fort Maiden Castle looks impressive from the air. Covering an area the size of 50 football pitches, it was home to a large and thriving Iron Age community. But it was also a great statement of power, a prehistoric version of the Tower of London. Even as late as the Iron Age, there's still no written history of this part of the world, so only archaeology can tell us what life was like here. To that end, I'm rejoining Neil Sharples.
When you dug here in the 1980s, what kind of things did you discover?
Well, we discovered all the kind of things you find in a normal Iron Age settlement. So we're walking across where the trench would have been.
Yeah.
All this excavated, lots of little features, post holes, more pits, all over the place there's pits. And essentially, there's another one over there that Mortimer Wheeler dug just there, and he found another one of these houses. So a row of houses.
An actual line?
Yeah, yeah, oh no.
That's significant. I imagined that you would tell me there was a cluster.
No, no, it's very well organised. You've got a row of houses that's going down there behind the rampart, following the edge of the rampart. There's probably a road along the side, and then 4 posters, perhaps grain storage, the other side of the road, but then another road further in, more rows, further rows over there. So very, really well organised, really quite systematic.
This is town planning. Was it a town?
If you or I were transported back into the past and we walked through the gateway and came into this, we would think of it as a town. The organisation to make this work as a settlement, you think of all the rubbish that has to be taken out, all the food that has to be brought here. The storage facilities are packed full of grain. The whole landscape around here is organised to feed this machine, the massive population that's living inside the hill fort.
How long did it last?
Well, first hill fort is built 450 BC, and it's more or less continuous construction, I would have thought, up to 150, 100 BC.
They must have thought they'd be able to stand here overlooking the Ridgeway forever.
The fort must have seemed unassailable, the perfect structure to defend its inhabitants against rival tribes or foreign invaders. But when it was built, no one could have imagined the force that would one day assault it. In 43 AD, the Roman conquest of Britain began. They brought sophisticated weapons with them, like the horrifying ballista. To get an idea of how Maiden Castle fared against the might of the legions, Phil's meeting up with a group of reenactors.
It's an incredibly one-sided fight, really, when you consider that on one side we've got this, and we've got that.
Yep.
And then on the other side of the scale, we've got people up there with no armour, a few spears, a few swords, and stones.
The odd mail shirt, and fighting naked. That was quite a thing, to fight naked. It just showed that you had no fear and you were impressing your peers. And men fighting naked against armoured men. You fire one of these into the massed ranks of enemy and it's going to hit something. It's a terror weapon. Right, whoa. Just put it straight back.
So,
ready when you are.
And I just pull it.
Pull it. Oh. And again.
Wow! This is the sight, is it?
Yes, you can
so that you could actually kind of lift it up, and you looked up there, and I'm looking at that person on the hill fort ramparts, and I'm saying to myself, I am going to take you out.
The Romans must have easily broken through the hill fort's defences. And once inside, they'd in all likelihood have slaughtered everyone in sight. There's ghoulish proof of such killings in the Dorset Museum. This Iron Age Briton was found buried at Maiden Castle with a Roman ballista bolt lodged in his spine. The Roman invasion swept away Britain's indigenous Iron Age culture. But new archaeology is helping us reclaim it. As Alex Langlands nears the end of his journey, has his new approach led him to any insights?
What I wonder is whether there's some kind of journey being made here. There's some kind of register of time passing, moving from generation to generation to generation. Maybe it tells an ancestral story in much the same way to us like a family tree does, or a genealogy tells that story of where we came from. And perhaps these barrows in a non-literate society, perhaps these barrows are doing exactly that. They're telling that story of ancestor after ancestor, and that journey back to where we came from, and that link to the land. 3/4 of a mile. That's it. The sad thing is though, it's time to say goodbye to the Ridgeway.
After all our investigations, it's time to share our insights.
Got your pint in, mate.
Oh, thank you very much.
Well, how was it?
Well, I started out as quite sceptical that archaeologists can go out and experience the landscape and almost imagine what it was like in prehistory. I thought, no, you can't really do that. There's too many modern intrusions. But actually, as I went on and started experiencing that landscape, it started to mean more to me.
So it was more than just a walk, it really was an experience.
Yeah, absolutely. It prompts questions that you almost certainly wouldn't have asked if you were just sat in a library reading books, you know, and looking at archaeological reports. So, you know, I'm sold on it.
What was it that you were able to glean from what you did?
I had to eat humble pie, didn't I?
In what way?
Well, you know as well as I do that to me the Stone Age is the be-all and end-all. There is nothing better than the Stone Age. They had to admit that bronze axes are actually better at chopping down trees than flint axes. So, yeah, it's sickening to have to admit it.
You know, what I find so amazing about all this is that archaeologists are now saying, all right, we don't know much about what happened around here in prehistory, but we've got the techniques to tell us stuff.
Absolutely, but I'm glad we don't have to do it the way he did it.
Part-timers.
You're going to walk back?
No, not after this. Crawl more like. Keeping it back of your van.
It seems that once the Romans had conquered the area, the Ridgeway lost its magic. Its monuments fell into decay, reduced to forlorn markers of an ancient way of life. But no invasion could stop it being a wonderful routeway, a path for walkers today, as perhaps it always was. Join Time Team on Patreon to access exclusive 3D models, masterclasses and behind-the-scenes insights.